Just to give you an update about where we are currently with U.S. history stuff, we've got, first of all, your document that you are hopefully referencing. So let me show you what I've got on my screen. Let me take one more run at this. Hi, Lauren. So let me highlight a couple different things. First of all, when it comes to Schoology has been fussy again today. And so I would be very much interested in having you do these things. Number one, with US history, I would encourage you to click on this document and keep it open away from Schoology because it does like to shut down a bit. And this is where I'll be jotting down for you each of the things that we're doing in class. And so this will kind of work like the slideshows that I've got running when you walk into my classroom. This is your link to the Google Meet that you guys just dove into. And then what I'll be doing is I'll put, like I did for Tuesday, a copy of the recording on this document. I'll also put it onto Schoology. So I've got a folder that is located on here as well. But with this document, it'd probably be best for you to have this open and not have to rely on Schoology, because I'm finding around this time of day, especially when schools nationwide start all using Schoology simultaneously, it is a platform that was not built to be an ongoing, consistent teaching tool that everybody is using. Their servers are getting overwhelmed, and so there's some lag that's going on with that. So here's what I would be encouraging you to do. Number one, make sure you're doing the attendance form every single day. Click right here. I've got this. And see how it's linked to Schoology, so it's having problems. I'm going to create a link instead to the Google form itself. Rats. So sometime during the course of the day, try to use the Google form that we've got set up for you. There it is. And I'm going to make a copy of this instead and put it into this form right here. So make sure you complete your attendance so that you're not getting any problems from the office. They're a little bit fussy about attendance at the state level. Our school district is a little bit more enthusiastic about doing daily attendance than other schools in the area have been. But for you guys, what I'll try to do is I'll try to keep an eye on who attends the Google meeting that we're doing right now. But make sure you fill out the attendance just to keep your attendance safe. This week, what we're going to be doing is a couple different things. First of all, your chapter 23 text questions are due today. So turn in your chapter. If you don't have them done yet, please make sure you get them done today so we can start reviewing that content coming up tomorrow. We're going to be reviewing your text answers for chapter 22 today. And like I mentioned, I've got this now recording. So if I move too fast with chapter 22, feel free to dip back into the recording. It should be available for you sometime before noon if you need to look that over. What we're going to be doing on Friday is your chapter 20 through 22 assessment. Your U.S. history teachers at the 10th grade level have been working together. And what we've determined is instead of doing a multiple choice test, we're going to be doing a short answer assessment just to give you a chance to write. It will be open notebook, open textbook. And so I'm hoping that it works out well for you. I will be running it through Turnitin to make sure that you're not lifting answers from the internet. But we'll be able to use that assessment as your form to figure out where you're sitting with that content and to get a grade in the grade book. We're still sitting in a difficult position. And the reason why we're in a difficult position is because of the different historical elements that we've taught you about when it came to like Hoover, FDR, and other sorts of presidents. So just to give you the kind of bird's eye view on what we're looking at nationwide, yesterday we had a press conference from the president, and the president has shifted course quite a bit, where he about a week and a half ago was saying that coronavirus was a hoax and we'd be back to normal by Easter. Yesterday, he came out and said that wasn't true. He tried to move quickly past the fact that he was the person who was saying that it wasn't all that serious, and now he's saying that it is. And what he came out and said last night was that if we get aggressive with like our quarantining and whatever, hopefully in the next 30 days we can bend the curve down. But he made the comment last night that if everything works out great and everybody in the United States takes this super serious, we're looking at death totals of between 100,000 and 240,000 people. And that's if we do everything right. And we still have states that have not even decided to make any changes to their behaviors. We've got people still congregating in parts of the country. And so there's a dilemma that's going on, because when they throw around numbers like that, if they throw around the idea that 100,000 to 240,000 is seen as kind of what we're expecting, you can see that that number is getting close to everybody that we lost during World War I. Your 240,000, you're looking at then the combined total of all of these wars added together is what we're looking at people passing away during the course of the summer. And so from my perspective, given what I'm hearing from Governor Walz and the state, they are very much embracing the idea that we should be aggressively be serious about what's going on with the coronavirus, which means that I don't know when we'll be getting back together, but I anticipate that it's looking more like weeks rather than days. And so for us, we're still trying to wrap our head around what will be happening with grades. If you had a test that you missed prior to the time that we let out, we're still trying to wrap our heads around what we do to help you make up for that stuff. And so please be patient with me and with us, because we're trying to piece this thing together. What we can do is we can keep farming out content for you to keep working on, like chapter 23 and beyond. And so what I'd like you to focus on today is we're going to take a look at chapter 22, get chapter 23 text questions done for today. And then I'll be able to lay out for you coming up over the next couple of days what we start doing with new stuff beyond the stuff that was already in your hands. Once we start getting a feel from the school as far as what grades look like and whatever. The other problem, though, that we're facing is very much what we studied with Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt. President Trump has been very reluctant to use something called the Defense Production Act. And it's a law that we've got available that would allow him to do what Woodrow Wilson and FDR did with World War I and World War II, where he could take control of factories and tell them, you're making this many things in this amount of time. And he's been nervous about that. He sees that as potentially being like socialism. The problem, though, is yesterday he announced that he was going to have like tests and respirators available by a certain date. And we've now hit some of those deadlines, and we aren't even close to produce the number of masks or ventilators that we need to help keep people safe. He also has been making the claim that many governors and many doctors are over exaggerating what they need, when many doctors and governors are saying that they're reaching the breaking point when it comes to being able to treat people, especially in New York. And so what convinced President Trump to be more of a supporter of being interventionist is the fact that he was brought a report that they're bringing in refrigeration trucks to New York because of the number of people they're anticipating will pass away and need to have that service because of the fact that they won't be able to bear them quickly. That then made President Trump become more serious about the fact that coronavirus is real. He just hasn't really broken out all of the production materials that could be done, because he's fearful of what that means for big government versus small government. From our perspective, then, when we take a look at that, that's then kind of giving us the feel that maybe we're in the cycle that we're in for the long haul. So for you guys, on Friday, we're going to be testing on chapters 20 through 22. You have the breakdown that I gave you on Schoology previously. So if you go back to here, you'll be able to find your breakdown in your materials for chapters 20 through 22. Look that over and make sure that you're good with the content that we covered. Today, we'll be taking a look at your chapter 22 text questions, and you can see the wheel of death spinning right there, where it means Schoology is having struggles. But here's what we'll be doing today. I'm going to quickly run you through the big ideas that you're supposed to have from chapter 22. I'm going to move fast. And so if you find that I'm moving too quickly to type, remember, this is being recorded. It will be available for you in an hour. So if you found that there was any slides that you see here that were problematic for you, just go back to the video, hit pause when you need to. And if you need to type out your notes in more detail, feel free to use this video to help you out with that. We are expecting you by this Friday to understand that after World War II was done, we then entered into certain agreements, like we created the United Nations, that created an organization that was meant to be like the League of Nations following World War I, where hopefully we will prevent future wars from happening because of this organization that we create to try to create peace in the future. We're going to also have a meeting called Yalta at the end of World War II, where Churchill, Stalin, and FDR met. And at Yalta, we had a meeting where the division of Europe took place. And what America tried to announce is we tried to tell Russia to stop pushing communism on other countries, but Russia wanted to take over Eastern Europe to keep it safe from invasions from other countries in the future. We also divided up Europe in this way. And so East and Western Europe, Eastern and Western Germany, East and West Berlin were divided up. The East became communist. The West was supported by the United States. And this is going to lead to what's going to be known as the Cold War. So as we studied the material that's coming up soon, the Cold War is what we're studying from 1945 until 1990. And we have a Cold War because if we get into a hot war with Russia, we will vaporize the planet with atomic weapons. As we take a look at East and West Europe then, and as you take a look at this slide, keep in mind of what Russia wants. Russia hates the idea of being attacked in the future, so they're going to drop what becomes known as the Iron Curtain over Eastern Europe. They're going to claim that they're doing democratic elections. They're not. And Harry Truman is going to realize that when we were dealing with Germany before World War II, we engaged in appeasement where we tried to give Germany what they wanted in the hopes that they would calm down. We discovered, though, that being appeasing to a dictatorship means that they're going to take advantage of that. So as we look at the period following World War II, we want to be able to use these terms. And this is very much what we're looking at even in today's world. One of the things that's been interesting about President Trump's response to coronavirus is he's announced that we're looking out for ourselves and the rest of the world needs to kind of figure things out on their own. And we've seen a really weird trend happening where we are actually having China send supplies to us and to Italy and to Spain, where in the past that used to be America's role. And so in the period following World War II, we engage in what's known as containment, which means we're going to try to stop communism from spreading to other countries. But the feeling is that America should be the ones who are providing aid to other countries so that they don't become communist and so they don't become friends with communists. So the Marshall Plan, we're going to send aid to England and France and all these other countries to help them rebuild in the hope that they will become friendly to the United States. We're now in a moment where we probably should be doing another Marshall Plan with coronavirus. We have the factories and the workers where if we want to produce masks and ventilators, we could mass produce them in gigantic numbers, give them to countries that are wrestling with coronavirus. Because if you want to picture something that's scary currently, our country is the wealthiest country on the planet, and we're facing hundreds of thousands of deaths from coronavirus. Imagine a country in places like Africa or Southeast Asia or other places that aren't nearly as developed as the United States. They're going to get coronavirus too without the resources that we have, and they're going to look to the United States for aid. And there's a question of whether or not we're going to provide it. Following World War II, though, the argument was that America being so wealthy, we should provide aid so that other countries become friendly with us so they don't become communist. And the feeling was America's factories then, if we provide this aid, we will then provide jobs to workers who will then get paid, which is an opportunity that is available for the president right now with our Defense Authorization Act. We do then have moments that we saw in class before we wrapped up together, the Berlin airlift, where we're actually sending supplies into Berlin because Russia tries to shut down Berlin and get the Americans out of Berlin itself. We create NATO. So if you look at all of these blue countries, this is an alliance system that we set up so that if ever Russia attacks one of these countries, we will then jump in on their side. Russia creates the Warsaw Pact, which is similar. And if you take a look down here in the southern part of Russia, down here you have the country of Ukraine. And part of the reason why Ukraine has been in the news so often is there was an idea a couple years ago of letting Ukraine join NATO. And if you've noticed, Russia has been very aggressive towards Ukraine in that time because they're not a member of NATO yet. If they ever joined NATO and Russia messed around with Ukraine, it would be like attacking the United States head on. So this organization is still being used to resist Russia, even though the Cold War ended a couple decades ago. For the Korean War, we do want you to understand that this is the first containment war that we ever have. And with the Korean conflict, like we saw in class, the Korean conflict is going to be a war where we fight to a tie in Korea, dividing North and South. And we still have troops in between North and South Korea currently to protect against the communists in the North invading the democratic government of the South. North Korea, since that time, has been developing nuclear weapons so they can threaten South Korea. And that's the reason why we haven't invaded North Korea yet, is they currently possess nuclear weapons that could start mutually assured destruction or MAD if we ever attack them. We've had a president in Donald Trump who's been claiming that North Korea would open up to democracy, that he'd get them to denuclearize. And the problem that you should be noticing with what you read in chapter 22 is we invaded North Korea and China felt threatened by that. The reason why North Korea hasn't been removed as a threat yet is if North Korea became friendly to the United States, we would then be up against China's border, which would make them feel very nervous. And so we're going to find that this is an issue that has been around ever since the 1950s, and we still wrestle with it nowadays. We do want you to notice the HUE Act during this time. There are organizations that are trying to find communists inside of our country, and they start high-profile investigations where they do find some communists here in the United States. They also are going to create this feeling of a witch hunt taking place where if you wanted to attack somebody, all you had to do is call them a communist, and suddenly large groups of Americans would turn on them for being anti-American. You'll also notice nowadays that that's part of the reason why Bernie Sanders struggled so much in his election is there's a lot of people who, when they hear him say that he's a socialist, even though he's talking about things that have been like just liberal ideas in the past, just the term itself is something that can cause Americans to react in a negative way, especially when you see guys like Alger Hiss, who was working in our State Department, and it was found out that he had been passing documents out of the State Department as somebody who might have been working with communists in the Russian government. As soon as we found somebody like him, or the Rosenbergs who helped us sneak our nuclear secrets to Russia, that made people freak out a ton that there were communists here inside the United States. We want you to understand also how we decided to fight the Cold War during this time period. And so during the time period of Truman and Eisenhower, Eisenhower wanted to figure out how to reduce the amount of money we were spending on weapons, and he wanted to figure out ways to keep the Russians on their side of the planet. So he announced a plan called massive retaliation. We spent tons of money on our Air Force, tons of money on nuclear weapons, and we engaged in something called brinksmanship, which means we're going to push Russia to the edge of nuclear war with the idea that if we can play this game of chicken with them, perhaps we can get the Russians to respect us and not be aggressive with their neighbors. We're going to find, though, in the next couple of weeks, the United States will do this to the point where we almost vaporized the entire planet in the 1960s. And there was a feeling that we shouldn't do this anymore because if we do decide to pull that trigger, we could destroy the entire planet with something called MAD, mutually assured destruction, where we and the Russians promise that we can vaporize the planet if we want to go just a little bit too far. So every single war that we think about getting into from this point forward always has looming over the top of it the idea that nuclear weapons could vaporize everything. When we look at Dwight D. Eisenhower then, if you take a look around the world, there are countries around the world who, when they hear the United States talking about how we are the country of freedom and democracy and liberty, they look at us skeptically. And the reason why is because during this time period, America was announcing that we are good and we would never engage in these sorts of secret operations behind the scenes without the knowledge of the United States. Our CIA was going into other countries and we were doing things to try to prevent the spread of communism. We'd even put in place dictators that we liked if they would help us in our attempts to be powerful. So like if you look at Iran right now, they had a democracy into the 1950s. They had a man named Mossadegh who got elected. He made the announcement that he wanted to have control over his oil supply and he would sell it to the highest bidder. And our CIA helped to topple Mossadegh, and we put into place a person known as the Shah of Iran. And the Shah of Iran was a dictator, but he was friendly to the United States, and he would get us oil so that we would be able to run our military and run our economy. If you notice that now Iran doesn't like us and they don't trust us, this is part of the reason why. We also sent groups into Guatemala so that they would be able to topple a leftist government and prop up a government that would be friendly to the United States. So what we'll find is, like, when we get to the last election that we had in 2016, and let me bring you back to over here. When we get the election of 2016, we had in the last election accusations that Russia and other foreign countries tried to interfere in our elections. And the problem that we had with getting super mad about that is many people around the world pointed out this is something that the United States has done in the 1950s and 1960s during our fight against communism. So when we had that done to us in our last election, it was not seen as something that was like brand new. It was just interesting that Russia was able to do things like broadcast on social media and whatever. It's been part of a pattern for the past 60 years in our battle between the United States and Russia. So that's where we leave off with chapter 22, is we take a look at what was going on with foreign policy and the Eisenhower presidency. This is obviously not the ideal way to teach you this stuff, but for you guys, it's time to wrap up chapter 22. Let's get an assessment taken care of, see what stuff you understood. We'll do it in writing form with open notes to be able to wrap up those things. And then as we move through chapter 23, I'll be teaching you in ways to kind of give you bite-sized chunks of content. And then we'll be able to give you assessments coming up soon that will reflect the stuff that you were able to pick up from the textbook. We have not received any guidance yet from the district as far as what our grading should look like if we're doing pass-fail, letter grades. Obviously, we're in brand new territory. What I would like to highlight for you, though, for those of you who are watching live, you'll notice on the right-hand side of your screen, you've got a chat function. You can type any questions you have there. We can also FaceTime, so if you want to unmute your mic and ask any questions that you have, that's totally fine as well. And then finally, the nice thing about distance learning, and this is one of the few advantages that we have, is after a class like this, I've now taught you the content that we would have. You would then roam off to another class, and many of you guys might have questions that you don't want to ask in front of other people. The way that we can deal with that easily is you can send me an email if you'd like to. I find, though, that the thing that I miss most about being around you guys is being able to interact and talk with you guys. And so feel free to send me a message where, if it would be better to use Google Meet to talk in person to get your questions fully answered and talk face-to-face rather than through email, feel free to nudge me about that as well. So I'm going to hang out here for a second. I don't see any questions in the chat room, so I'm hoping that you're good. All of the stuff that we discussed is right here on your Google document. And then, like I mentioned, I'm going to post the recording of what we just did. And it should be here by noon, so you're able to see it, hopefully even quicker. But I'm going to stay on here. If you're good and done, I am done, good too. Hit the attendance. Make sure chapter 23 text questions are done today. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or else feel free to send me a message so we can communicate later. Good? It's good seeing you guys. I'm hoping to see you live sometime in the near future. But again, be smart. There's news reports coming out of kids your age who, while you're not as susceptible to coronavirus, that doesn't make you immune. So especially if you touch any surfaces outside your home, make sure you don't touch your mouth, nose, or your eyes until you actually wash your hands well with soap. The coronavirus is incredibly, pathetically weak when it comes to soap. And so that soap will then take out the protein exterior. And be careful. There are some people who are putting on the internet now that the coronavirus isn't that serious because we've had coronaviruses in the past. This is typically how we get our colds, is there's a corona shell on the DNA that is part of that virus. The thing that makes this one unique is this is a disease that is bridging the human-animal barrier, and this is the first time. So they'll sometimes call it the novel coronavirus because it's made a movement from animals to human beings. And what we're seeing right now in the United States, is there are people who are catching this virus who are not immune, and they overreact, their body overreacts to this disease, kind of like what you saw with Native Americans at the beginning of our textbook, where when we had a new disease show up, there are some people who are susceptible. We're hoping that it's not you or I, but we don't find that out until after you catch this. So the smartest thing you could be doing is making sure you take care of your hygiene well. So if you do get sick, it's not now when the hospitals are about to be overwhelmed. It's instead later when the hospitals are better prepared to be able to take you in, treat you, and make sure that you're safe. So if you have any questions, feel free to open up your microphone and ask. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I would encourage you, again, get the document, the Google document on your computer so you don't need to rely on Schoology, because it's disappointing on Wednesday of this week that Schoology is still struggling. I think this might be an ongoing thing. All right. So I'll stay on for a bit. I'll watch you guys exit the room. Feel free to unmute your mic if you got questions. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks, guys.